So, thank you for taking your time to do the interview.
No problem.
How did the project start? Were you a fan of McQueen or a connoisseur of the fashion world?
I didn't really know Lee personally. When I first moved to the UK in '97, he just got the job at Givenchy. So he was all over the media. And again, the way Lee was, he wasn't like just stuck within the fashion world. He worked a lot. He collaborated with people in the music world, in artists, the young British artists, Damien Hirst, the Chapman brothers. His presence and his influence was seeping within the cultural psyche of London. And I think it was very hard not to know about Lee. On top of it, for me as a young creative, having moved to study in London, I loved his work and I loved all of it. I couldn't get to the shows, I wasn't part of that circle, and I wasn't a fashion student trying to, a lot of fashion students try to break into fashion shows like this. But so he was an influence visually, definitely. But I never, it's not like 20 years ago you would have told me we would be sitting here talking about McQueen documentary I would have made. I would have said, I would have laughed. But at the same time, when the co-producer of the film came out of the meeting, and it was a very informal meeting with a distributor, not even one of our distributors right now, but mentioning different interesting British icons. The name McQueen came up, and they called me up right away. Oh, Ian, you've done about a lot of fashion films, and you've been involved in the music industry, in the music video. I did a lot of music videos and commercial, all beauty, fashion-y. And they said, would you be interested? And I called up my business partner and co-producer, and we just said, yeah, let's do it. And then from that point, we got Peter Etedegi, the writer, co-director, involved, and we wrote a story, and we developed the story together. And from that point, we just pushed it along. We just tried to convince people to give us some money to make the film.
How long did the research take, and how did it evolve?
Actually, it shocks people when we say, from start to finish, a year. Just a year. I would add maybe 2-3 months to come up with the idea and the concept and write the thing. We spent another 2-3 months of research, a bit of archive research. But that archive research, we had to kind of start again more or less from scratch when we got the financing together and we started making the film. But overall, literally, I know we financed the film in Berlin in 2017, and we gave the film for the distributors late February, early March 2018, so a year.
Was there something in the process of research or in the life of McQueen that really surprised you?
There's quite a few things that you discover because we didn't know everything. I think something that dictated the process and how we managed to convince people to talk is, I don't think neither Peter or I, or even some of the other producers, had realized how touched and how sensitive it was still for a lot of people to share the memories of Lee. So you have to constantly remind audiences that when you make a movie about someone who's died and died in such a tragic way, the people that stays behind all have a feeling of blame and what if I had called him, what if we had spent more time, what if I had done this, I wish. And I think when you start approaching the project, it's always you have to keep that in mind, because for people to sit down like now and do a live interview and share those very, very sensitive and painful memories, it takes a lot of courage and it's very brave. So I think that's some of the elements.
But of course, as a filmmaker, you go for emotions.
You go for emotion, and that's why, there's been a lot of documentary lately where people just use the archive. We took the decision from day one to use the interviews, and that's why, we shot the interviews in a very cinematic way. It's not extreme close-up, but it's very strong close-ups and a wide shot. And we constantly use those two things, because for me, it's not that I have an issue with documentary with that, but documentary I wanted to make needed to be as visually thrilling as possible. I really wanted to make a theatrical opportunity, a theatrical movie. It's a movie doc. That's how I call it. So the way we shot it, those close-ups, you really read the emotion. And the emotion is not like someone crying only. If it's someone when they don't say anything, or they look away, or you can see a bit of emotion in the eye, it's almost like a really good close-up from an actor. But what's fascinating with documentaries is they're not actors. So as an audience, they're talking about real life. And, when people are emotional, they're not acting it out. They really those emotions. I think it would be a pity to keep that away from the audience, and that's what we use. That doesn't mean that we just relied on the interviews. We used a lot of archive, and we used as well some 3D skulls that we created. But the whole experience, the whole collage montage of the film, ended up being very cinematic, I think, and emotionally.
Very often in documentary, which use archive material, things that you would like to have, key moments, are not there because nobody filmed them. So there's a particular scene that amazes me. You have that moment where McQueen has the Givenchy contract in his pockets and meets Issy Blow, and a sad moment where they kind of split up. Who filmed that, and how did you find that?
This was already released. The BBC was making a documentary about McQueen right at the moment when he got actually the Givenchy job. So they were filming the meeting at the Hills, which was Isabella Blow's house and Detmar Blow's house, and they made an edit of it. Sadly, the BBC got rid of the rushes because we know there was a lot of B-rolls and there was a lot of other things. But the way we did it, we intercut that with other footage around this time, things we had shot ourselves. So we made it seamless, and we removed the fact that it was a documentary made. We made it feel like the audience was immersed and watching it live. And I think that's why we really worked really hard with the film, is we tried to use as much as Lee's voice and Lee's presence as possible, and Lee controlling the narrative in a way. Obviously, he can't control the narrative, not being present anymore, but that's always what we had in the back of our heads. When you make a documentary, we felt that we wanted to structure it almost like a real movie. So we thought of a 5-act structure, a bit like the Greek tragedy. So we've got the first and the third act, and the second act is divided in twos with reprise. So we constructed the storytelling. That's why we've got those 5 chapters. They were perfect to have those acts, and then we wanted to try to make, because documentary sometimes takes you out because you've got the archive, you've got the interviews, and we try to create it seamlessly. You've got loads of different formats, but we made the conscious decision to zoom everything in and to have everything to be full screen, even if you lose resolution. I believe in the intelligence of the audience. The audience is used now to mobile phone quality, VHS, and we almost have a reminiscing feeling of the whole thing. So we really wanted to immerse visually and as well as in the storytelling and emotionally. And I think the music as well helped us patching it together. Sorry. Yes.
And speaking of dramaturgy, you have a natural dramatic arc given in his life and the terrible end of his life, of course. Did you and Peter Ettedgui ask yourself how the film would be different if Lee McQueen would be still alive?
I wonder if it'd be possible to make a movie if Lee was still alive. I don't think it was hard enough. I think it'd be even harder. He was quite a secretive person, so if there was a movie about him, he would have chosen exactly who potentially would have done it. To answer your question though, we thought about potentially, because as you said, people potentially knew he had passed. So to use that as the beginning, because it was not a reveal anymore. But at the same time, we felt that instead of, what we really wanted is to go behind the curtain. So we wanted people to fall in love with him. So if you let people know, even if a few people don't know, or even if people know, but you actually take them on a journey of life, of this great spirited person, this anarchist, this, enfant terrible, but very funny, very silly and mad and brave. And if you take the people on his journey, then when you start showing the difficult times, then they really feel for your character. So I think if the ending hadn't been there, I think we could still have done the fun bit and a bit of the dark bit. But I think, sadly, and it might sound a bit, easy for me to say as a film director, but I think that tragic ending lends itself for a film to be made.
Gives a natural arc.
It gives the natural arc, and we didn't try. We played more within the structure. We didn't try to be super clever. We use flashback and flash forward thanks to the chapter structure, because like this it allowed us to choose different time space. It's not, we don't cover every moment of the 18 years of his career, but I think we just would have followed the natural arc anyway.
There's, I like the film a lot. There's only one little thing I missed. Considering McQueen being such a great craftsman, he's really an incredible craftsman. I always look for like a 4 or 5 minute scene where we see the development of, let's say, one garment. Now, the first idea, the first sketches, the tailoring, the little adjustments. Is it a choice of you that you said you don't want that kind of a little micro narrative, or is it more because just you cannot find that in the stock material?
The footage is there. We played with an idea of using, but we didn't get allowed to use that footage.
Okay.
So I totally agree with you. Not to make advertisement for the DVD and the iTunes, but some of the early black and white photograph from the early show, and Lee mocking about he's doing cartwheel in Isabella Blow's property, and you see Isabella Blow. The photographer who shot that had shot 5-6 rolls of Super 8, but he couldn't find it. And for a whole year, we tracked it down, and he found it, but the person was working abroad. He was in a container somewhere. So we kept on looking for it, and we had to lock picture, and it didn't happen. And suddenly, he called us up the next day of the premiere in the UK, which was around early June. And he said, I found it. Do you want to see it? And the next day, I think we had hangover that day. So the following day, we watched it, and it's amazing. And there is a sequence of Lee creating a suit for Detmar Blow. And it's exactly the suit he wears in the interview. So we re-edited the sequence with Gary, the photographer, and the person who filmed it, with Lee, narrating. And it's a 7-minute, and it's amazing. There's special footage of the family, etc. So again, it's just, if people want more, we have tried to give more. But we have tried, and it's not cunning, or I would have loved to have that in the movie, but because we didn't have it, we still worked our little butt off to try to make it happen for people to still see it.
And what can you tell us about that kind of illusion in the movie, the presence of that skull that constantly reminds us of death?
Lee wasn't obsessed with death. He was obsessed with the macabre. He loved the macabre. He loved all the dark aspect of life that he could drag ideas and concepts and things from. And I think that's one of the things that is very attractive for a lot of people out there and a lot of young creative. So the skull is not only representing death. It's a Renaissance motif as well. It's the Vanitas skulls, which was very present in some of the more classical influences only. So we wanted to make an homage to that, and basically it became a very strong motif within the Alexander McQueen brand or aesthetic, let's call it. And we wanted something, again, my issue with documentaries, the camera can't move around. If you make, the fact of tracking around someone, and what was amazing with 3D is we could travel, we could have shots above. Sorry, I'm moving, I'm hoping. But I love that, and I approached some of my friends at a company in the UK called Time-Based Arts, and they're very, very strong special effect designers and 3D designers, and they loved the idea to help us on the project, and we brainstormed ideas, and they came up with a title sequence. And then after the title sequence, then we decided to do chapter headings, because we had structured the film like this. And at some point we were like, oh, is it gonna break the flow of the movie? And actually it didn't. And then those visuals were so amazing, and we found recording of Lee's voice, but we didn't have visuals to use on it. So instead of trying to get some shitty archive to illustrate what we're saying, what about just using some beautiful metaphorical image? Because that's very much Lee. It's always metaphorical what he does. So that element as well felt that we wanted to use them, and we started using them more and more. So all those elements made the skull more and more prominent.
So it's even a part of the subconscious of his inspiration, the macabre, not the desk, yeah.
Completely. And the final skull is actually the poster. And the poster was actually designed by Gary James McQueen, his nephew. And the way we did it is Gary designed it in 3D, but then we built it. We asked a sculpture to build more or less 1.50 meters to 80 centimeters. So the poster, they are real flowers. And what we did is we shot it and we created visuals for the film, you know, when there's the announce of his death with the flowers dying. So we actually put the skull on the floor, put loads of, and then we left a still camera taking some stop frame animation over 48 hours. Then the birds flying off, we actually filmed a bird flying, loads of different birds.
Real birds.
Real birds. So none of that is CGI. People say it's a lot to take in. I like a lot. I prefer to come out full and have loads of questions and maybe watch it again than just like, well, that was a little thin. I'm not very much a minimalistic person.
Can you tell us something about the first few images in the movie? The fish in a fish tank. What does it mean?
Lee had a passion for underwater. And we found that footage he has shot himself. There was, you know, this, he had bought, in his first house he bought in East London with his money, he had a massive fish tank. Not massive, like a quite decent sized fish tank, and he was mucking about with the footage. And you can hear the TV and you can hear him talk. And we love the contrast of the really high-end title sequence with like the 3D and the macabre and the very heavy, not heavy, but brass and polished Michael Nyman soundtrack. And then suddenly you've got poof, and you've got the fish tank and like Minky, Bingy, and he talks to his doggy. And yeah, all of that, we love that because it almost felt like you're expecting fashion, we're going to give you the man. So obviously, you know, people don't have to read into that, but that's the way we created. And that footage was amazing footage, and it was so amazing to get that footage. And, you know, Lee sitting down, he's talking actually, you know, when he says, oh, you're going to cut my hair tonight, and he's talking off camera. I'm doing it like the camera, so he's talking. This is Mira Chai, which is a person, and she was the one having that tape. She had no clue what was on that tape. And he was living with her, and it was Lee's camera, and she, when through moving around, she ended up with the camera. And the person saying, I'm going to make a Alexander McQueen documentary, we're going to call it the McQueen tapes. That's her ex-boyfriend that was there filming it. So suddenly we thought, let's not call them chapters, let's call them tape. And it's happy accident. And I think that's the magical thing with documentaries, is that you learn. Another thing really quickly before we get stopped, and I think it's a really nice thing, is when we approached Michael Nyman to make the music, he was quite positive from the start. It wasn't, you know, we didn't chase him. He was really interested because he had collaborated with Lee. But when we first met him, he said, look, I'm going to play you a song that I created and I composed for Lee. But he didn't use it. He didn't like it enough to use it in his show. See if you like it. And he played us that song that called Saraban that he had replayed on the piano. And it was amazing.
I wasn't very good at school. I was always drawing clothes.